This is the Midnight Narrator, and you found us on a rainy night. There is no better time to gather in the dark. These tales are designed to send a chill down your spine, while the sound of the storm helps you find a strange and wonderful peace. It's a paradox I hope serves you well, whether you're here to relax or drift off to sleep. If you enjoy this unique comfort, a like is always appreciated. And please subscribe to ensure you never miss a stormy night with us. For our comment tonight, I'd love to know, what is your favorite thing to do on a rainy night? A brief note before we begin. I am always working to keep ad interruptions to a minimum. Thank you for your understanding. Now, let the rain fall and let the story begin.
Every kid needs a summer job in college. I found one picking peaches at a beautiful, remote orchard in Georgia. The pay was great, the people were friendly, and the work was honest. They had only one strange rule: never eat the fruit you pick. I thought it was about quality control. It was about survival. That summer, I was 19 and desperate for money for the next semester. I found a flyer on the campus job board. Seasonal pickers mounted, sun-kissed orchards, great pay, lodging provided. It sounded perfect. A summer spent outdoors, getting a tan, and making good money. I called the number, and a friendly, fatherly voice on the other end, who introduced himself as Mr. Abernathy, hired me on the spot. The orchard was even more beautiful than I could have imagined. Rolling hills covered in rows and rows of lush, green peach trees, all heavy with ripe golden fruit. It was located in a remote, quiet valley, miles from the nearest town. The air was sweet with the smell of peaches and honeysuckle. We, the seasonal workers, a dozen or so other college kids like me, lived in a clean, rustic bunkhouse. It felt like summer camp, but with a paycheck. Mr. Abernathy was the patriarch of the place, a kind, sun-weathered man with a warm smile and a firm handshake. He and the handful of permanent, local workers treated us well. On our first day, he gave us the grand tour and explained the rules. They were all simple, except for the last one. Rule number 5, he said, his warm smile fading for just a moment. You do not eat the fruit you pick, not a single bite. All peaches go in the basket. It's a matter of quality control and respect for the harvest. Understood? We all nodded. It was a weird rule, but he was the boss. The first few weeks were idyllic. The work was hard, but satisfying. We'd spend all day under the hot Georgia sun, the sweet juice of the peaches staining our hands. At night, we'd sit around a bonfire, drinking beer and sharing stories. The only strange thing was the quiet watchfulness of the locals. They were friendly, but their eyes always seemed to be appraising us, measuring our strength, our speed, our stamina. I also noticed the carvings. On some of the oldest, most gnarled peach trees, strange, spiral-like symbols were carved deep into the bark. When I asked one of the local workers about them, he just smiled and said, "Old tradition, to keep the blight away." He spoke of the blight as a hushed reverence, like it was a vengeful god. He said it was a sickness that could turn a whole crop black and rotten overnight. The symbols, he said, kept the soil pure. As the end of the summer approached, Mr. Abernathy announced the annual Peach Festival. It was a huge party to celebrate the end of the harvest. He also announced a special honor. One seasonal worker would be crowned the king of the harvest. The king would be the picker who had worked the hardest, brought in the most fruit, and shown the most dedication. In that moment, a silent, unspoken competition began between us all, and I was determined to win. The competition to be crowned Harvest King became the only thing any of us talked about. We all pushed ourselves harder, working faster, staying out later. I was a natural. My baskets were always the heaviest, my peaches the cleanest. I could feel the approving eyes of Mr. Abernathy and the locals on me more and more. Around that time, one of the other pickers, a guy from Florida named Josh, got sick. It started with a strange, dark rash on his arms, then a fever. Mr. Abernathy was the picture of concern. He drove Josh into town himself to see the local doctor. That was the last time any of us ever saw him. A few days later, Abernathy told us that Josh's parents had come to pick him up, that he'd had a bad case of mono and had to go home. It was strange, but in the competitive frenzy of the harvest, we just accepted it and moved on. My unease started to grow. One afternoon, I was exploring the woods that bordered the orchard, and I stumbled upon a small, dilapidated one-room cabin I'd never seen before. Inside, it was empty, except for a collection of old framed photographs on the wall. They were pictures of past harvest kings, dating back to the 1950s. A gallery of smiling, proud young men, all outsiders like me. And in a dusty box in the corner, I found a collection of hundreds of dried-out peach pits. Each one had been intricately carved with the same strange spiral symbol I'd seen on the trees. A cold, sick feeling started to pool in my stomach. This wasn't just a job. This was something else. I pulled out my phone, intending to look up Josh on social media to see if he was okay. No signal. We never had signal out here. I tried to call his number from memory. A robotic voice informed me the number had been disconnected. The final horrifying piece of the puzzle fell into place the night before the festival. I was working late, trying to get one last massive haul to secure my win. I saw Mr. Abernathy and two of his local workers walking into the orchard, their forms silhouetted against the rising moon. They were carrying shovels and a large, heavy-looking burlap sack. My curiosity got the better of me. I followed them, hiding behind the rows of trees. They walked to one of the ancient carved trees at the far edge of the property. They began to dig a deep hole at its base. Then they opened the sack. It wasn't fertilizer. They pulled out a pair of worn-out work boots, a faded t-shirt, and a leather wallet. Josh's things. They placed them carefully in the bottom of the hole and began to bury them, a silent, grim-faced ritual under the moonlight. I didn't sleep that night. I knew I had to get out. Josh hadn't gone home. He was gone, and his things were being fed to a tree. I crept back to the bunkhouse, my mind screaming, and started to quietly pack a bag. I went to grab my car keys from the hook by the door. They were gone. I frantically searched my bunk, my pockets. Nothing. One of the other seasonal workers, a quiet kid named Dylan, was watching me from his bunk. "Looking for these?" he asked, holding up my keys. I lunged for them, but he pulled them back. "You can't leave before the festival, Ethan," he said, his eyes empty and calm. "It's the tradition. Mr. Abernathy would be very disappointed." I was trapped. I looked around the bunkhouse. The other 5 seasonal workers were all awake, all watching me with the same placid, vacant expression. They were either in on it or too terrified to do anything but obey. The festival was a surreal nightmare. A massive bonfire roared in the center of the orchard, casting dancing, demonic shadows on the trees. The entire local community was there, their faces happy and festive, but their eyes all seemed to be fixed on me. They offered me food, cider, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was a knot of pure terror. Then the ceremony began. Mr. Abernathy stood before the bonfire, his face glowing in the firelight. He gave a long, rambling speech about the history of the orchard, about the purity of the soil, and about the ever-present threat of the blight. "The orchard provides for us," he said, his voice booming, "and we, in turn, must provide for the orchard. It is the sacred pact." The locals all cheered, a rhythmic, chant-like sound. Then he held up his hands for silence. "And now," he said, his eyes locking with mine, "it is time to crown our King of the Harvest." He announced my name. The cheer that went up was deafening. 2 of the local men came and tried to guide me towards a large, ornate wooden chair that had been placed before the fire. A throne. "I don't want it," I said, my voice shaking as I backed away. Abernathy's warm, fatherly smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold, hard disappointment. "The orchard provides," he repeated, his voice now a low, menacing growl. "But the blight must be fed, the soil must be paid its due. The king is not just an honor, son, it's a sacrifice. You are the strongest, the most vibrant. You will give the orchard your strength for the next season. You will become the guardian." The locals started to close in on me, their friendly faces now grim masks of religious fervor. They weren't holding weapons. They were holding peaches. Dozens of them, holding out the ripe, perfect fruit towards me. "Eat, eat the fruit, accept the blessing, pay the toll." They were going to feed me to their God, to their soil. I didn't wait to find out what happened next. I bolted. I shoved one of the men aside and sprinted away from the firelight into the suffocating darkness of the orchard. The chanting behind me turned to shouts of anger, and the entire community gave chase, their footsteps crashing through the undergrowth behind me. I ran blindly, the gnarled branches of the peach trees whipping at my face. I could hear them closing in, a human wolf pack baying for my blood. I remembered the abandoned cabin I had found, my only hope. I ran in what I prayed was the right direction, my lungs burning, my body screaming. I finally stumbled into the small clearing and threw myself at the cabin's rotting door. It burst open, and I scrambled inside, barricading it with a heavy, overturned table. I could hear them surrounding the small building, their angry shouts echoing through the thin wooden walls. I was trapped. Then I saw it. A small square outline on the floorboards. A trap door. I ripped it open, revealing a dark, musty-smelling hole. A root cellar. I lowered myself in, pulling the heavy door shut over my head, just as the cabin door splintered and crashed inwards. I huddled in the pitch-black, earthen-smelling hole for hours, listening to them search the cabin and the surrounding woods. Eventually, their voices faded, and the orchard fell silent. I waited until the first rays of dawn were filtering through the cracks in the trap door. Then I climbed out and ran. I ran for miles, finally hitting a main road who, thank God, believed my terrified, incoherent story and took me to the next state. I went to the police. An investigation was launched, but they found nothing. Mr. Abernathy and the workers at the sun-kissed orchard told the police I had gotten drunk at the festival, made a scene when I didn't win the cash prize, and had run off in a delusional fit. There was no sign of Josh. There was no proof of anything. It was my word against an entire, tight-knit community. For years, I thought I had escaped. I finished college, got a job, tried to build a normal life. But I've been plagued by strange health problems, a persistent dry cough, a weird dark rash that comes and goes on my skin. Doctors were baffled. Last month, I finally saw a specialist, a top glycologist. He ran a series of obscure tests. He came back into the exam room with a look of pure academic disbelief on his face. "This is impossible," he said, looking at my chart. "You're infected with a variant of Monolinea fructicola, a type of parasitic fungus. But this strain, it's incredibly aggressive. It's integrating with your own cells. I've only ever read about it in old, obscure agricultural journals from the 1920s. They called it the umbral blight. It consumes its host from the inside out, turning the organic matter into a new fungal growth to feed the soil." He looked up at me. "It normally only infects stone fruit, like peaches. How on earth did you come into contact with this?" And in that sterile, white exam room, the final, horrifying truth hit me. That very first day, I had been so hot and thirsty, I had broken the one rule. I had plucked a peach from a tree and eaten it. The competition, the chase, the harvest king, that was for a different kind of sacrifice. But I had been infected from the very beginning. The locals weren't trying to feed me to the blight. They were trying to feed the blight with me. I was the chosen host, the walking, talking vessel, meant to be planted at the foot of their sacred tree, to nourish their orchard with my own decaying body. I hadn't escaped. I'm just a ghost, walking on borrowed time, waiting for the final harvest. My brother and I spent the summer of my 12th year in a small town called Harmony Creek. It was the most perfect, friendly, welcoming place I'd ever been. We were there for their annual Sun Festival. I didn't understand the festival's main event wasn't the parade or the fireworks. It was the choosing. And that year, they chose my brother. The summer I turned 12 was the summer my parents sent my little brother Sam and me to stay with our grandparents in Harmony Creek, Ohio. If you were to design the most perfect, idyllic small town in America, it would be Harmony Creek. Perfectly manicured lawns, charming little houses with welcoming front porches, and neighbors who knew your name and brought you freshly baked pies. The air of absolute, unwavering safety was almost suffocating. We arrived just in time for the town's biggest event, the annual week-long Sun Festival. It was a celebration of the town's founding, and the whole place went all out. The days were filled with a wholesome, nostalgic blur of pie-eating contests, sack races, and craft fairs. The town's mascot, a figure named Sunny Jim, was everywhere. He was a man in a costume with a giant, round fiberglass head painted like a smiling, benevolent sun. He'd walk through the crowds, waving with his oversized white gloves, and all the kids loved him. I always thought his smile was a little too wide, his black mesh eyes a little too empty, but I chalked it up to a cheap costume. The centerpiece of the festival was the choosing of the Sunbeam of the Year. It was presented as a great honor, chosen by a town-wide raffle. The winning child would get a key to the city and a place of honor on the main float in the Founders' Day parade, right next to Sunny Jim himself. My brother Sam, who was 7, was obsessed with the idea. He must have entered his name into the raffle 50 times. And, unbelievably, he won. The mayor called his name out on the town square stage, and the whole town erupted in a cheer that felt a little too loud, a little too enthusiastic. Sam was ecstatic. My grandparents were bursting with pride. I felt a strange, cold pang of something, not jealousy. It was unease. The way the townspeople looked at Sam after his name was called, it wasn't just happy. It was a look of deep, satisfied, almost hungry pride. The day of the big parade, Sam was dressed in a little white suit and placed on the main float, a huge, gaudy creation covered in sunflowers. He sat on a small golden throne, waving to the cheering crowd, and next to him sat the silent, smiling Sunny Jim. The float passed by where I was standing with my grandparents. Sam gave me a huge, happy wave. Then the giant, smiling head of Sunny Jim slowly rotated, a full 180 degrees on its neck. Its blank, black mesh eyes seemed to fix directly on me. I couldn't see the person inside. All I could see was a deep, unblinking darkness. After the parade, Sam was a local celebrity. Everywhere we went, people would pat him on the head, offer him free ice cream, and call him our little sunbeam. He loved the attention. But over the next few days, the attention seemed to be changing him. My brother, who had always been a loud, messy, wonderfully chaotic little boy, became quiet. He was calm, placid, and he smiled constantly. Not his usual goofy grin, but a wide, slightly vacant, perfectly pleasant smile. He stopped wanting to play video games with me or build forts in the backyard. Instead, he spent all his time in the town park with the other local children. I watched them one afternoon from a distance. They weren't playing tag or swinging on the swings. They were playing strange, silent, almost ritualistic games. They would stand in perfect circles, humming, or they would walk in slow, synchronized patterns across the grass. There was no laughter, no shouting, just a weird, harmonious quiet. And the humming, that was the creepiest part. Sam started to hum. It was a simple, monotonous, tuneless melody, just a few notes repeated over and over. And I started to notice that all the other children in Harmony Creek hummed the exact same tune. It was the town's background music. I tried to talk to my grandparents about it. "Doesn't Sam seem different to you?" I asked. My grandma just beamed. "He's just fitting in, dear," she said. "He's finding his place. He's finally found his harmony with the town." The way she said harmony made it sound like a threat. I finally confronted Sam directly one evening in our room. "What's wrong with you?" I demanded. "You're acting so weird. You're not my brother anymore." He just looked at me with that same placid, unsettling smile. His eyes seemed distant. "Nothing's wrong, Leo," he said, his voice flat and calm. "Everything is sunny now. Everything is happy. Sunny Jim taught us the song. He taught us how to be happy." He then reached out for my hand, his expression suddenly serious. He said, "I can teach you too, if you want. Then we can all hum together." I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. The boy in front of me looked like my brother, but the light inside him was gone. I knew with a certainty that terrified me that something had happened to my brother on that parade float. It was connected to Sunny Jim. I had to find out who was inside that costume. The next afternoon, there was a small ice cream social event on the town green. Sunny Jim was there, of course, posing for pictures. I watched him all afternoon. When the event ended, I followed him. The big costumed figure walked with a slow, deliberate pace away from the crowd towards the old whitewashed town hall. He didn't walk around to the front. He went to a small, unmarked service door in the back and let himself in. I waited a few minutes, my heart pounding. Then I crept up to the door. It was unlocked. I slipped inside. I was in a dusty, dimly lit storage hallway. I could hear faint footsteps up ahead. I followed the sound to a door labeled Archives. I peeked through the small wired glass window. The room was a cluttered storage space, and in the very center of it, standing on a small wooden stand, was the Sunny Jim costume. Its arms were hanging limply at its sides, its giant sun head staring blankly at the far wall. But the room was empty. There was no one else in there. The man who had been inside the costume was gone. The room had no other doors, no windows. My mind was reeling. How was that possible? I crept into the room. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the costume's big, round head. It was made of a strange, lightweight material, like a very old, very hard papier-mâché, and it was warm. A faint, low vibration seemed to be coming from it, and I could hear a barely audible sound. It was the same monotonous humming tune that Sam and all the other children sang. That's when I saw the books. Old leather-bound town records stacked on a metal shelf. I pulled one down. It was the record of the very first Sun Festival from 1888. I read the spidery handwriting. It described a somber ritual to ensure the town's lasting harmony and to appease the sun's eternal hunger. It talked about choosing a sunbeam,
a child who would be given the great honor of the mask. I found a list of names, a list of every sunbeam of the year for the last 100 years. My brother's name was just the latest in a long, unbroken, terrifying line. I heard footsteps in the hall. I quickly and silently hid behind a tall filing cabinet. The mayor and another town official walked in. They didn't see me. They were looking at the Sonny Jim costume with proud, reverent expressions. The new one has settled in nicely, a perfect fit. The last one was starting to fade. They carefully lifted the costume off its stand and carried it out of the room. And I finally, horribly, understood. There was no man in the costume. The costume was the thing, and it had just gotten a new battery. I knew I had to get my brother out of there. The festival was ending the next day with a huge closing ceremony at sunset. I knew that was my deadline. After that, whatever was left of the real Sam would be gone forever. I spent all of the next day trying to get through to him. I talked about our parents, our dog, our favorite secret handshake. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of the old Sam in his eyes, a look of pure terror and confusion. "It's too loud in my head, Leo," he whispered, his voice shaking. "The humming won't stop. It's so happy." Then the placid, empty smile returned to his face, like a mask dropping back into place. I had to make a plan. A desperate, stupid 12-year-old's plan. During the closing ceremony, when the entire town was gathered in the main square, I was going to cause a distraction and grab him. The ceremony began as the sun started to set, painting the sky in fiery orange and red. The entire town was there, all standing, all humming their quiet, monotonous tune. The Sonny Jim costume, with my brother inside, was led onto a stage. The mayor began a long speech about another year of peace and perfect harmony. I made my move. I snuck around to the back of the town hall and pulled the fire alarm. The loud, blaring siren shattered the town's placid hum. In the ensuing chaos, as people looked around in confusion, I ran. I ran through the crowd, pushed my way to the stage, and grabbed my brother's hand. "Sam, we have to go, now!" I screamed, and I pulled him, hard. I dragged him off the stage, and we ran, leaving the giant hollow sun head of the costume rolling on the stage behind us. We ran towards the woods at the edge of town, but he was fighting me, trying to pull his hand away. "No, I have to go back!" he yelled, his voice a strange, multi-toned thing that was not his own. "I'm the sunbeam! I have to make everyone happy!" The townspeople were now running after us, their friendly faces gone, replaced with looks of cold, angry determination. I had my brother's hand in mine. He was fighting me, trying to get away, trying to go back to them. The whole town was closing in, and I had to make the most horrible choice of my life. I could keep fighting, keep trying to drag him with me and let them catch us both, or I could run and save myself. With tears streaming down my face, I let go of my brother's hand, and I ran. I ran and I ran, and I did not look back.
On a road trip There's a point where the sun and the asphalt start to play tricks on you. You see water on the road that isn't there. We saw something else. In the middle of the hottest desert in America, we saw a town. The map said it was empty desert. The map was wrong. Or maybe we weren't in the desert anymore. It was the summer of our great American road trip. My boyfriend Ben and I had spent a year planning it, a month-long journey from east to west. The part I was most excited and most nervous was the stretch through the Nevada desert, a long, empty highway known for its brutal, soul-crushing heat. The reality was worse than I imagined. Our car's air conditioning chose that exact stretch of road to die. The heat was a physical thing, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the car into a mobile oven. The asphalt ahead shimmered, creating mirages of cool blue lakes that would vanish as we got closer. We were following our phone's GPS, which had directed us onto a desolate state highway to save time. We were running dangerously low on water, and the needle on the gas gauge was kissing empty. We hadn't seen another car for over an hour. We were in the middle of nowhere, and we were in trouble. And then the car died. It gave a final wheezing cough and just coasted to a stop on the shoulder of the empty highway. Dead. No cell service, not a single bar. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the oppressive hum of the heat. We were stranded. As we sat there, a feeling of pure, hopeless despair beginning to set in, Ben saw it first. He pointed a trembling finger towards the horizon. "Maya, look!" In the distance, shimmering in the heat haze, was what looked like a town. A few low buildings, the distinct shape of a water tower. It had to be another mirage, a cruel trick of the light and our desperate minds. But as we watched, it didn't disappear. It remained, a solid, steady promise of salvation in the shimmering distance. We had no other choice. We grabbed our last half-full bottle of water and started walking. The walk was a brutal, sun-baked nightmare. The town on the horizon never seemed to get any closer. I was on the verge of collapsing, my vision blurring, when we crested a small rocky rise. And there it was. Not a shimmer, not a dream, a real, physical town, nestled in a small, impossible valley right in front of us. A hand-painted wooden sign at the edge of the road read in cheerful, welcoming letters, "Welcome to Last Chance. Population 62. We stumbled into the town like survivors of a shipwreck, and it was perfect, impossibly perfect. We had just walked out of a 110-degree hellscape, and here the air was cool and pleasant. Perfectly green lawns were watered by sprinklers, and every house was a pristine, cheerfully painted model of 1950s Americana. The people were just as perfect. They came out of their houses to greet us, their faces all holding the same calm, pleasant, slightly vacant smile. They offered us tall, ice-cold glasses of lemonade. They seemed to have been expecting us. "We're so glad you made it," a woman in a perfect floral dress said, her voice a soothing, melodic hum. "We were getting worried about you." How could they have known we were coming? The town was a living time capsule. The cars parked in the driveways were all vintage models from the 50s and 60s, gleaming as if they were brand new. Old cheerful music drifted from a soda shop on the corner of Main Street. But as we looked closer, we started to notice the strange things. There were no children. We didn't see a single person under the age of 30, and there were no roads leading out of town. The highway we had walked in on just ended at the town line. They told us not to worry about our car. "It will be taken care of," a friendly man told us, patting Ben on the shoulder. "You two just rest and rehydrate. We have a room for you at the guest house. No charge, of course." We were too exhausted, too dehydrated, and too disoriented to argue. We let them lead us to a beautiful, clean room, and we collapsed onto the bed, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. That evening, we sat on a bench in the perfect town square, watching the sunset. A small band was playing pleasant, sleepy music in a gazebo. All the other residents of Last Chance were there, sitting on benches, all smiling their same serene smile, all watching the sun go down. But they didn't speak to each other. They didn't even look at each other. They just sat, perfectly still, like a congregation of flowers turning towards the last light of the day. And then I noticed it. The sun was low, casting long dark shadows across the perfectly green lawn. Our shadows. But no one else had one. The dozens of other residents, sitting perfectly still on their benches, cast no shadows at all. We woke up the next morning to a soft knock on our door. A woman was there with a tray of fresh fruit and coffee. "Good morning," she hummed in that same melodic voice. "Your new clothes are in the closet." I looked in the closet. My hiking shorts and t-shirt were gone. In their place was a simple 1950s style sundress. Ben's jeans and band t-shirt had been replaced with a pair of pressed slacks and a button-down shirt. Our backpacks, with our phones and wallets, were gone. We weren't guests anymore. We were being assimilated. The town, which had seemed so welcoming, now felt like a beautiful, sun-drenched prison. It operated on a perfect, unspoken loop. Everyone woke up at the same time. Everyone performed simple, pleasant tasks. Gardening, painting a white picket fence, reading a book on a porch swing. Everyone was always smiling. Always. I tried to break the loop. I approached the woman who had brought us lemonade the day before. She was calmly tending her rose bushes. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding harsh and panicked in the serene air. "We need to leave. How do we get out of here?" The woman's smile never faltered, but her eyes went cold and empty for a terrifying second. "Leave?" she hummed, snipping a perfect rose. "But you've just arrived. You're part of the harmony now. Why would anyone ever want to leave paradise?" She turned her back on me and began to hum that same monotonous, tuneless melody that the band had been playing last night. The worst part was I was losing Ben. The placid, serene atmosphere of the town was working on him. "Maybe this place isn't so bad, Maya," he said to me that afternoon, his voice lacking its usual sarcastic edge. "It's so peaceful. No stress, no worries. Maybe we should just rest for a while." His smile was starting to look as empty as everyone else's. I knew I had to find an answer. That night, while Ben slept a deep,
peaceful sleep, I snuck out. I broke into the small town hall, the only building that seemed to have any administrative purpose. I found the town records, a dusty ledger filled with names. It was a list of new arrivals dating back to the 1950s. Dozens and dozens of names, all in pairs or alone. The final entry, dated the day we arrived, was Maya and Ben. It all clicked into place. The impossible green lawns in the middle of the desert, the perfect cool air, the people with no shadows. The town wasn't real. It was a mirage, a sophisticated, hard light hologram powered by the brutal, relentless sun. A beautiful, perfect Venus flytrap designed to lure in desperate, stranded travelers. And the people had been real once. But now, their minds, their consciousnesses were trapped, integrated into the program, doomed to live out the same perfect, pleasant, horrible day over and over for eternity. I had to get Ben out. I ran back to the guest house and shook him awake. "Ben, it's not real. It's a trap. We have to go," I yelled. He looked at me, his eyes hazy and confused. The placid smile was gone, replaced by a flicker of his old self, a flicker of fear. I knew our only hope was to destroy the power source, to break the illusion. I grabbed his hand and pulled him out of the guest house, into the pre-dawn darkness. "We're going for a walk," I said loudly, to no one. I led him towards the edge of town, towards where the solar array was on the old map I'd seen. As we left the central, most powerful part of the projection, the illusion began to fray. The air grew hotter. The perfect green lawns started to flicker, revealing the cracked, dried desert earth beneath. Ben gasped, the serene placidity on his face shattering, replaced by a dawning horror. The other residents noticed. Their pleasant smiles turned into identical expressions of cold, silent anger. They began to step out of their perfect houses, moving towards us, not running, but walking with a calm, terrifying, unified purpose. We ran, scrambling over the invisible line where the town ended and the real desert began. We found the power station, a small concrete building in the center of a massive field of solar panels. I grabbed a heavy rock and smashed the main control panel, shattering glass and sending sparks flying. As the power died, the world dissolved. The perfect houses flickered and vanished. The green lawns disappeared. The smiling people dissolved into columns of shimmering golden light, letting out a single collective sorrowful sigh that was carried away on the hot desert wind. We were standing in the middle of the empty, sun-baked desert again. Our car was a few hundred yards away, right where we had left it. And lying on the cracked earth where the beautiful town square had been was a scattered collection of old, weathered human skeletons. Dozens of them, the previous residents of Last Chance. We were found by a highway patrol officer hours later, severely dehydrated, but alive. We tried to tell him our story, but he just shook his head and gave us a sad smile. "You too saw the Last Chance oasis," he said. "Local legend, ghost town that appears to folks who are in trouble in the heat. You're the first I've ever heard of who actually came back." As he was helping us into his air-conditioned car, Ben stumbled. He was pale, His lips cracked from the sun. I looked at his face. He was smiling, a calm, serene, perfectly pleasant and utterly empty smile. He looked up at the brutal sun desert, a look of peaceful bliss on his face. "It's such a lovely day, isn't it? So full of harmony." And I realized with a soul-crushing certainty that I hadn't escaped the town with my boyfriend. I had escaped with a souvenir.